This is the greatest place to start your day on a Sunday morning. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Cascade Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in North Central Washington. For those who are new to this fellowship, we use the acronym CUFF, C-U-F-F, to identify C-U-U-F. I don't use it very often. Thank you for being part of this vibrant community. Visitors, friends, family are welcome. Every person of goodwill, just as you are, wherever you come from, whatever body you inhabit, whatever your age, whomever you love, we are elated you are here this morning to join us. This morning, January 26, 2025, the theme of our service is, What is Fellowship? The presentation and delivery of our Sunday service takes a community of people to put this together. This morning, our fellowship leader and speaker is Reverend Thomas Perchlik. I'm Hideo Fujita, your celebrant today. I serve on the worship team, the tech teams, and whatever else I'm asked to do. In your order of service, you will find a list of volunteers who are assisting with this morning's service. Those on Zoom, you can find the order of service in the chat. Those who are in the sanctuary, would you please turn around, face the camera right above the exit sign, and give a big wave to the people on Zoom. I know we have some visitors here this morning, so just take the next minute to turn around or face forward and introduce yourself to people around you. What great energy we have this morning. We invite everybody for coffee, treats, teas, conversation in person or on Zoom after the service. And this is also an opportunity to expand the conversations you started before the service and complete those. And we have visitors here this morning, so please introduce yourself to them if you have not done so already. This is also a good opportunity. When you look at your order of service, all the people who are involved in putting this together, if you have any comments for us, because we love to get comments, because we want to improve the services to what you need and the best we can do. I have four announcements this morning that some of them were shown in the pre-service loop and some of them weren't, but the ones we're repeating are worth repeating. The first one is, if you find yourself recovering from a medical procedure or illness, or needing a ride to the doctor's appointment or some medical procedure, please let the CUFF care team know. They're using the lotsofhelpinghands.com website to help facilitate this. So please talk to somebody in the care team or look in the weekly notes and announcements email that gets sent out. The second announcement is the Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network's event. An immigrant and refugee justice march and rally will be held this coming Thursday, January 30th at 1:30 in Olympia. This is the Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network event for all. You can find also more information in our weekly CUFFs email. The third announcement, after our service today, the new task force forum is going to be held. So if you have time and you want to learn more about the new building, please stay right after the service. And our fourth announcement, Julie is right here, is going to give us a quick update on the board.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Julie McAllister. I'm the president this year of our Board of Trustees. And I want to thank Don Flick, our secretary, for writing up our report. So the Report from last week's board meeting is really brief, as the board is primarily remaining focused on a few key issues. First is finding a new home for the fellowship. As Hideo mentioned, the forum to provide more information in preparation for next week's advisory vote after the service will be held today. We're hoping to start by noon. It will also be on Zoom. If there's a more important issue for the fellowship, we don't know what it is. Please pay attention, get involved, and stay involved. There's an informational discussion after today's service. Please stay. Also, if you have not yet completed the survey that came out by email, please do so. We only have about 30 responses out of 109 members, so that's not an overwhelming advisory for us. Second is bringing our religious education program back to its full promise. Going forward, parents of children will be interviewed to understand their religious education needs and interests. Third, the nominating committee will be seeking members for the new Committee on Ministry. It's really a committee on shared ministry to work together with Reverend Perchlik to evaluate our overall ministry programs for the fellowship. So if you're asked to serve, please agree to. And please remain involved in the life of the fellowship. You are all why we are here. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Our land acknowledgement. Our fellowship is located on ancestral homeland of the Pasquosa. The land from Lake Wenatchee down to the Wenatchee River and across the Columbia River to right where we are here is ancestral land of the Pasquosa, the Wenatchee people. For thousands of years, time immemorial, the Pasquosa have been stewards of this land, fishing, hunting, gathering plants for medicine and food, and practicing cultural traditions. The Pasquosa, now part of the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation, still live here. We acknowledge that their land has been taken over because of U.S. government broke treaty obligations and allowed uninvited colonists to settle here. We stand beside the community of Pasquosa First Nation people as they continue their traditions and seek to have their rights recognized. You can find more information on this subject on our website at cascadeuu.org. Please go to the Justice page on our CUF website to find web links to the Indigenous rights, reparations, and advocacy groups. Now, let's rise in body and spirits with our opening hymn. I think there's a typo in the order of service. It is hymn number 361, and the lyrics will be displayed on the screen up front too.
Don't forget to
You may all be seated. I call you into the spirit of worship, the act of worship, which is, for Unitarian Universalists, is not bowing down so much as lifting up what is of value, what is of worth. My colleague Eric Wickstrom from Charlottesville, Virginia, wrote these words: "When we light our chalice, everyone focuses on the flame. Yet it is the oil of the globe or the wax of the candle, the cotton of the wick, the potassium chloride with sulfur in the match, and the oxygen in the air around it all that make the flame real. In this fellowship, we are not called to just be lonely lights on a hill. Rather, we are meant to work together so that we might each shine and together bring a greater light into the world." So I will read the first lines of the words that we're going to light the chalice with, and then I invite all of you to start with the word be the light, and read all together if you're, as long as you're willing. Here's the, yeah, thank you. O light of our hearts and the spaces between them, help us to shine and bring light to the world. Be the light of our creative spirits, awakening hope, the light of our wise souls, moving us through dark times, the light of our wondering and curious minds, calling us onward, the light of our love for this place, this people, this work, leading us to the beloved community. And now a story.
Now, a story for all ages. We have one child, and she's going to remain in the back, so I'm going to stay where I am to share this story. This is a story I wrote and illustrated, and with some help with AI. This time, it's a lot of work to put these things together, so I need help wherever I can get it. The illustrations will be displayed on the front screens. The Great Race, the rest of the story. A big change is also called a transformation. This story is about two transformations. One big change or transformation is how 12 animals became legendary after the Great Race. The other big change or transformation is how the winner of the Great Race loses the friendship of his best friend. The first big change or transformation. A long, long time ago, the Jade Emperor held the Great Race for all the animals of his kingdom. The Emperor announced that the first 12 animals to finish the Great Race would become the 12 animal symbols on the lunar calendar. The years next to the animal's calendar picture are the years each animal appears in the lunar calendar. The year of your birth date tells you which animal symbol is yours. The race was exciting. All the animals of the kingdom, big and small, fast and slow, competed. At the finish line, the Jade Emperor's artists painted portraits of the winning animals, putting them forever in the 12-year lunar calendar. The second big change or transformation. The cat and a rat, two animals in the Great Race. The other big transformation is how the winner of the race, the rat, forever loses friendship of his best friend, the cat. And now the rest of the story. A long, long time ago, the rat and the black cat were best friends. Everywhere you go, if you see the rat, you would see the black cat by his side. They did everything together. Before the Great Race, the rat goes to the barn to talk to the ox. Now the ox, knowing that the rat and the black cat are terrible swimmers, told him, "You could ride on my back across the most challenging portion of the race, which is the great big wide river." Bright and early on the morning of the race, the ox, the rat, and the black cat are seen crossing the big wide river. Now the rat's ego starts eating at him. All the rat can think about is winning. The Great Race would be such an honor to be in first place. The rat, being a rat, plans to remove his competition. The rat decides to get rid of the cat first and then the ox. The rat, knowing how much the black cat loves fish, points at the water and says, "Look, look, there's fish." The black cat can't resist, looks over the side of the ox, starts leaning over, and then you know what the rat does? Gives the cat a big push, splash! The poor black cat falls into the river. She finds a log, crawls up on that log to keep her afloat. Meanwhile, the rat riding on the back of the ox continues to cross the river towards the finish line. With the rat still on his back, the strong ox crosses the river ahead of all the other animals. The ox trots out of the water and on the land towards the finish line. Now the rat is so excited. The rat climbs on top of the ox's forehead. He can see the finish line. To the rat, all that matters is what? Winning, yes. The rat is willing to do anything for first place. First place, that's what I want. That's all the rat can think. Right before the finish line, the rat runs up over the top of the ox's head and leaps as hard as he can ahead of the ox, crossing the finish line first. The ox ends up taking second place. Meanwhile, back at the river, the black cat finally crosses the river. She is tired, but happy she did not drown. She runs as fast as she can back to the finish line. The Jade Emperor sees the black cat crossing the finish line. He says, "Oh, I am so sorry, black cat. You are too late. The race is over. You finished in 13th place." Hearing this, the black cat screams, "Yow!" The black cat was furious after learning she was in 13th place. The black cat missed the chance to be one of the lunar calendar animals because of the mean rat. The black cat dries herself off, rests, and then goes after that rat. The moral of the story: a major change is a transformation. I have 3 things for you to think about. First, would you like to be remembered as a legend many, many years from now? Second, what is more important, becoming a legend or keeping a friendship? Would you sacrifice friendship to win a race? And the third is, how do we change? How do we repair seemingly impossible situations for the better? The first transformation, the Great Race, transformed 12 animals into the lunar calendar legends. 2025, in the 12-year lunar cycle, is the year of the snake. Now this snake looks like it's prepared for 2025. The second transformation, the cat and rat relationship, was transformed from being best friends to mortal enemies. Now you know why black cats are unlucky, why the number 13 is considered an unlucky number, and why cats hate rats. The third thought is, how do we change? The cat and rat mirror conflicts we see in our lives today. What do we need to do to change? I leave you this as food for thought. For this story, how do the rat and cat repair their relationships to be able to return to being best friends? The end. Well, we do have one child. I'm not sure if she wants to go through the arch. You don't want to go through the arch? Okay. We can just sing you to the back then. Now go with each other to find meaning in the spirit of love that we share. Now go to each other to find meaning in the spirit of love that we share. And now we have some wisdom readings.
No wisdom readings today. A lot of other things. The Center of this congregation is to create community around spirituality and religion, as we define those things. To create community, we set aside this time, time in the service to share moments of significance in our lives. Remember, we only share what we have permission to share. We try to share briefly, 1 or 2 sentences, if at all possible. And to say our name before we begin, and then light a candle in memory, or ask me to light a candle as a marker of that event in your life. Creating community, forging connections, getting to understand one another is central to what we do here and how we do it well. It's not a lot of space behind the table, so it might be better just stay in the front rather than me trying to move the table, spilling the sand, and causing lots of disruptions. Anyone who has something they feel they need to share, strongly need to share, please come forward. I remember the first time that I introduced practice of silent sitting into worship. And it lasted about 10 or 15 seconds, 10 seconds maybe. And someone just told me afterwards that they were really anxious. They didn't know what they were supposed to be doing during that time. I had to teach people it's not always about doing. If you had asked me about fellowships back when I was just starting high school, before I met any Unitarian Universalist people, I would have said something about this particular group of 9 persons. A fellowship of the ring, a fellowship. They were a group of people who identified with each other because they had a shared purpose that was a vital life and death purpose. They got some different ideas about how to fulfill that purpose. The fellowship fell apart. Religious congregations, however, like this fellowship, are more complicated, more multi-layered. Of course, we have 10 times as many members, more than that. But there are different complicated relationships and different understandings of what it is we're doing and different needs that bring us here. Religious congregations are quite multi-layered, and so another image that I use to invoke a fellowship like ours, a religious community, is the image of a solar system. No, next one. There. We'll go back to that guy. We all have a shared center, a source of light and warmth and energy and life. And we can see each other in the light of it. I was out last night. I drove out into the dark spaces so that I could see Mars and Jupiter and Saturn and Venus. Venus is incredibly brilliant these days. It's in opposition, so it's really bright right now. And we can see each other, and we connect, and we identify. We're all part of the same planetary system. We're all tugging on each other with various levels of gravity. We travel about the center at different distances, different orientations. But then also we have maybe family or friends that come into the fellowship off and on. And it's not strictly limited to the planets, the 9 planets, or however many we want to number them, 7. Instead, there are moons that come in, and they're part of the system. And there are comets. I've always seen these people, comets, who come into a congregation and they brightly shine brightly. They do something that's really dramatic and catch everybody's attention, and then they drift away again. And then they come back. And then there's those distant planets and solar systems. And it's hard to talk about those because in a solar system, it seems very, very isolated from even the nearest system, which is light years away. But here, our congregation, our community overlaps with several others. What motivated me to speak about the definition of fellowship, the meaning of fellowship, is that I have been reading about the radical changes in the American religious landscape. And it's reflected in a global religious landscape as well, revealed by the Pew Research Center and some others. Not long ago, most people in America were expected to be a part of a religion at some level, Protestant or Catholic, or maybe Jew. It used to be that about 40% of all people in America said that they attended religious services 3 out of 4 times a month. Today, only about 30% say that they attend that often. And we know that people say what they wish they were doing. But it turns out when we've actually done statistic censuses that it's not quite, it's a little closer to 20% or fewer. They're that regular. Today, 18% of Americans say they are neither spiritual nor religious, which is up from only 9% back in 1999. Of those who are willing to say they are religious, only 40% of the total say they are religious. 47%, just less than half, when back in 1999 it was 54%. And in decades way before that, it was much higher. Also, there are those who are willing to say they are spiritual, but not religious. That has increased precipitously, dramatically. Meanwhile, the radical, conservative, authoritarian, and highly politicized forms of Christianity are growing. In the face of these great cultural shifts in the world, I began to wonder, what is a fellowship? What is our fellowship? What should it be? And what are we inviting people to join? We've been speaking this month about transformation, about the new statement of what Unitarian Universalists do at a national level, and the statement on transformation is being open to change, basically. Being willing to change, to grow, and to help one another change and grow. Affirming that that growth and change is never perfect and it's never complete. Now, in reference to something that Hideo said earlier, my computer used to always autocorrect CUUF. I thought I had messed it up and to try to add in an F, right? Get rid of that extra U. And somewhere along the way, I'm not sure exactly what it was, the computer seemed to figure out, my Grammarly program seemed to figure out that I had a unique word that I was putting up there, and it no longer autocorrects it. In part of the reason we use the word fellowship, UU fellowship, is because of the fellowship program. This was a growth strategy of the Unitarians before we merged with the Universalists in 1961. The Unitarian Association, there was a guy named Frederick May Elliott. We had a picture of him earlier. I don't know. Yeah, Frederick. Great intellect, scholar, great leader, powerful leader. The program, he'd heard about these things called lay centers in Christian communities, and he wanted to promote those for UUs. The program of fellowship served Unitarians from 1947 to 61, and then after the merger continued all the way until 1967. It was 20 full years. And the goal was to seek out small groups of 10 or more people in an area where there was no UU congregation, no Unitarian congregation, and figure out who was interested and get them together. It would help them form together and then strengthen. The fellowship movement became one of the largest drivers of Unitarian, over a third of congregations by the end of 1967 that were in the congregation had come in through that movement, fellowships. one of the last of those congregations, or the very, very first one, the very first congregation that was ever formed was the Fellowship of Boulder, Colorado. There are now 250 Unitarian Universalists in that, what is now called a church, and there's 3 other new congregations in that area around it, all in a place where there were no Unitarian Universalists at one point. It was the fastest source of our growth, and it helped us transform and transcend old habits of regionalism, created more of a national sense of identity. I want this congregation to grow in power and significance. I want us to be well known and important to the Wenatchee Valley. This fellowship once planned a bigger building because we were growing beyond 130. The average size of a congregation in America, Jewish or Christian of any sort, is 150 members. I think we can reach that goal. Despite the weirdness of post-pandemic religious decline and change, I expect us to create something and offer something that is vital and draws people in. And I want to use a summary of our stated mission and purpose: to seek, to embrace, and to serve. The actual statement is to seek inspiration and understanding, embrace all on their individual spiritual journeys, and serve our local and world communities. To seek, to embrace, and to serve. This is what we are about. This is what we are inviting people to do. And it's desperately needed in this time with this administration and the National Center. To seek is to engage in an open-ended approach to belief and practice. We used to say that our core values were freedom, reason, and tolerance. These were our guide words, and often Unitarian Universalists would talk about freedom and reason and tolerance. Now we talk about those things still, but as part of our foundation. And what we're really engaged in or more centrally focused is on creating love and justice and spirituality. One day I was explaining to a newcomer to a Unitarian Universalist congregation, they were part of what I call liberal religion. And as I was talking about liberal religion, he unexpectedly interrupted me and he said, "This is not a religion at all." And I was a little shocked, and I stepped back and I said, "Why?" And he goes, "Because a religion is defined as a set of doctrinal beliefs about God." There was no other definition for him. This is how he had been trained. And I had to teach him over the years about how to open up to the great diversity in humanity. We had Hindu members of that congregation, people who had been raised in New Delhi and other places. And their religion is not centered around congregational life. It's often something that you do individually or with your family, or maybe your whole village is doing it. Your whole city is doing something that has religious background. It's interesting that the Pew Religious Survey Research Group interviewed people in Asia. And there, if you say, "Are you very religious?" almost none, very few said yes. But then if you said, "Have you lit a candle this week for your ancestors, or have you given a prayer to the spirits or the powers of the universe to bring something into your life?" And 80% would say yes. They're engaged in what we might call religion, but it's defined differently there. It's socially constructed differently there. So one of the things that's really significant about Unitarian Universalists is we create this community of people who gather together and see one another, hear one another, and touch one another, and identify in this life-changing work that we have been called to do. In parallel to seeking, we also speak about educating. The word educate comes from a Latin root called educare. It's funny, all my Latin has shifted into Spanish pronunciations now. I can hear it. I had the words, these Latin words I used to say, and they've all gone Spanish. It's sort of funny. The word educare means to draw out or to raise up. Most people, when they hear the word educate, they think it means pour stuff into people's heads, right? It's about ideas and thoughts and understandings. But it's really about character. It's really about raising up the best person. And sometimes knowledge and information is essential in becoming the best person, to know what is true and know how to find out what is true. It's one of the things I worry about with schools that are being chartered off or separated out of the system, that they're not about educating people, not about drawing out the best in people. To draw people out and up, to help people seek to grow their character, develop their potential. Mine and yours is the reason that we gather together. Not just to learn stuff about other religions. Now, that's part of it. But to understand our own spiritual path better because we hear the paths of others. So we need to look for those people who are spiritual but not religious, and in fact suspicious of anything labeled religion. And at the same time seeking all those people who are looking for spirituality and do not know how powerful being in a community of other seekers and growers, and others who are raising things up means. We're trying to grow the children's program, restart the children's program. I kind of thought it would just happen by itself. Now I'm getting directly involved. Sort of pleased to hire Mari, but we're now talking about other possibilities of it, bringing families together, creating family events, and drawing in children. I remind you that the reason that I'm a Unitarian Universalist was that my mother was going through change in her life, and it was in a little UU fellowship in Greeley, Colorado, and they decided they were going to have a youth group for teenagers. And they were all required to go out and invite a youth to this party that they were holding. And there were about 8 kids that came to that event. But my mother, when she invited me, she told me about this rule. She'd been given this rule: you must go and invite a youth. And she said, and you're my youth. At that time, I was very quiet, I said this before, I'm a very quiet, very shy, very introverted person. Thoughtful. I had maybe 4 friends, 3 or 4 close friends in school. And I had gone to school with the same people for 12 years. Well, 9 years at that point. And within a year, it was first in the spring, we went to a conference. There was, instead of just 9, or I dwindled down to about 4, there were suddenly 15, 20 youth that I was connecting with. And then I went to a week-long conference, and there were 50 youth. And I went to another, and within a year, I had gone from having 3 friends to 300. And it was that sense of community, because I immediately loved the ideas. I immediately understood the ideas and the values and the principles, but it was the sense of community, of connecting to people. People who are part of an even vaster community of seekers trying to find their best selves and find their best way of being in relationship with other human beings. Seekers and finders and learners with thousands, yes, thousands of others linked over thousands of years of history and groundedness and rootedness. The second thing about a congregation is not simply seeking and finding. And that's oftentimes, remember, you talk a lot about seeking and never about the finding. What did we find? And that's really how you say, here's what I found. And the other person will go, oh, that doesn't fit with me at all. This is what I found. And you start listening and changing and growing and deepening your understanding of what you're doing. But then it's that embracing that creating loving community, not only amongst ourselves, but out in the world. Learning from our allies and other living things. Making relationships across differences. The Pew Research Center, when they were looking at this new category, the SBNR, the SBNRs, the spiritual but not religious people. And they started asking, well, so what do you mean by spiritual? And the most overwhelmingly common response to that was connected. Connected maybe to a transcendent spiritual realm or a transcendent spiritual being, but much more often connected to the universe, connected to the earth, connected to the wholeness of life. That sense of connection was what they were finding, seeking and finding. So the very definition of religion is shifting. And now the choices are so diverse, it's confusing. Part of the reason that the conservative religious people have become so entrenched is they can see that there are more choices, more possibilities, and it makes them anxious. Well, what's the real one, and what's the right one, and where do I fit? If I've made this commitment, how do I fit in this melange of ideas and possibilities and religious practices? So when people come in, we show them. We try to create with everyone a community of trust and openness and willingness to be transformed, knowing it's never finished and it's never complete and it's never perfect, but always seeking. The choices that are pulling against us are many. One of my colleagues says, the greatest competitor to Unitarian Universalist congregations right now is brunch. People want to go, especially after the pandemic. It's like, why should I go to that group and sit with those people when I can go take a hike in the mountains or go eat brunch with my family? Commitment is hard. So when we are inviting people into this community of seeking and embracing, we don't emphasize commitment right away. We don't talk, even in our newcomer events, we don't say, you have to become a member. It's the old Christian model, you're in or you're out, you're saved or you're damned. We just say, come on in, connect, look, hear, see what you find. I love our Share the Plate program, in which we once brought in people who were doing beaver habitat restoration. And we were reminded that beavers are part of our community. And then the third thing is to serve. I was so very happy when I listened to Bishop Buddy, the Episcopal bishop, at the national unity service. After a divisive election, they chose the theme of unity and they wanted to bring people together. And she got up and served so many people, including the President of the United States, by calling for mercy and asking for people to be merciful. It's a way to serve. It's to be kind and forgiving and inclusive. Of course, the response from some was that she was a radical leftist and a Trump hater at that. Not mentioning anything about Jesus, saying, "Blessed are the merciful." We have many allies who are working right now, and the reason I mentioned the Share the Plate is we bring these people in, we see them, we talk to them, and then we support the work that they are doing. And often some of us go out and help do that work with them, creating a deeper sense of community, seeking the meaningfulness of the life of service. How are we going to support immigrants as we move forward? We do not know whether the policies will be as draconian as some people have promised them to be. But we must stand with individuals, help them. The gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, queer communities, those people are not going to be erased. I was glad for the candle we had today. How are we going to support and nurture and encourage and and affirm the existence and the reality of all human beings. We overlap with all progressive communities and organizations, connecting. And all of us are connected in the great, beloved community of all souls, seeking, embracing, and serving. In response to these bunch of words and ideas about a fellowship and what a fellowship is, I could call the great fellowship of the universe that we're trying to join. We now have a musical piece called One Voice, performed by our singers.
We are blessed by your generosity. May your gifts make the difference in our communities through the ministries of this church. And now, if you would like to rise in body and spirit for our closing song, We Begin Again in Love, written by our own Steve Clem. The lyrics will appear on the screen.
Here in the beloved fellowship, in the gathered community of people who seek to embrace and serve, let us be blessed, let us be glad, let us appreciate the day before us. And may we go out into the world seeking, embracing, and serving joyfully. Amen.
Now we will extinguish the chalice, and the words follow the words on the screen. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These all we carry in our lives, into the light in our lives, until we are together again. And in our accustomed tradition, we close our service by forming a large circle, and if you feel comfortable, you could hold hands.